Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. You know, I empathize with Colorado because I've had to go through this in New Mexico. While they avoided a assault weapons ban, they have several gun laws that did make it through that some of them are not necessarily good, but some of them are definitely bad because it sets a precedent that allows them to exploit it in the future. So I'm going to go through a couple of these, all of them that I think that are relevant. One of them is a new requirement for concealed carry permits. So Colorado basically ended up with what we have in New Mexico. What that means is you have to go through a training class now. Now, I actually recommend that you do a training class. Do I think it's a requirement for you to have your concealed carry? No, I actually don't. Your rights are your rights. Whether you get training or not, that's up to you, not the government to mandate it. I think it's a damn good idea. I mean, if you're going to carry, you need to be serious about it, and you need to actually know what you're doing, because that is a big deal. You know, this is just like learning how to drive a car, in my opinion. Once you take on that responsibility and you're growing up, so to speak, especially in the 2A, you need to be very responsible. And where a concealed carry training class will teach you to put bullets where you need to, and it'll teach you about applicable laws if you do have to draw your gun and use it in self-defense. So, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts, as they always do with these gun bans. So, or these gun restrictions. They have banned guns in schools and voting sites in the state capitol. Again, this is that safe spaces thing coming to rear its head. There's still fights in New Mexico and Albuquerque specifically, or Bernalillo County, fighting these legally in the federal court because, well, your rights are your rights, and better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And regardless of where you're at, you should be able to carry, especially, I would say that if you do have a concealed carry, you should get some sort of additional endorsement if they make you have training, or if they want you to have training. Incentivize it. Make it easier to get your concealed carry. Maybe, you know, some sort of cookie that they have to give you training. I'm all for that, because then it incentivizes people to get more training, and more training means you're more effective. More training also means you're a better advocate for the 2A. Okay? So they got their first at least a piece of the red flag law. So they have to surrender their firearms if you're subject to a temporary domestic violence restraining order. Now, I understand both sides of this argument. I don't agree with either side. The reason why I don't agree with one side says that these guys are, you know, nuts. They got into a fight and with their significant other, whoever it is, or someone in their house, and that they have to have their firearms taken away. There is actually an argument for that, because there are some nuts people that have killed people, killed their spouses, killed their husbands, because they were pissed off at them. So there is an argument there. I understand that. But conversely, if the person is a turd, male or female, and they put a restraining order on someone, and that other person is actually the violent party, meaning the one that put the restraining order on this other person. The other person was the victim in this attack, but they're putting a restraining order on them. You have now limited that person's ability to defend themselves against that person who was the attacker. So I think that this is specifically should not be a thing. The other thing is, there are a lot of people that are hurt and pissed off in relationships. I know I have been. Luckily, I've been blessed with the females I've dealt with. None of them went so far as to do this so that they didn't restrict my 2A rights, but that would be a thing. You know, if they're pissed off and they want to say you beat them up, there's not a lot of requirements for them to show proof that you did this and that you're requiring a restraining order. They can look at things that you posted on Facebook that were innocuous and put that in a context of you stalking them. And I say this because we live in a digital age and a social media age where there are a lot of people that think you're posting about them directly, and it's not the case. You're posting because you thought it was a cool meme or you felt it strike your heart, And other people will take that to heart and think that you're talking to them. If that's the case, as long as they don't get the law involved, lace that shoe up and go ahead and write it, because you obviously feel there's some sort of thing there, some sort of wrong that you have perpetrated, because that's a reflection of you, not the person that posted it. So the next one. New requirement, I've already covered that one. Merchant category codes. So this one is a big one that they should have fought harder for, against, I should say. What this is categories. So if you buy with a credit card or a debit card, they're allowing merchant codes to be put on there that says you have a firearm. This was for a firearm purchase, firearm accessory, something like that. Why am I against this? Well, I'm not for the government tracking you in any way, any method, any fashion, especially knowing what we've seen lately, that they've weaponized the social media algorithms and the social media in general to see if you are left or right or in your political leanings. And this would be indicative of them saying you're a right extremist, because they could petition, the federal government could petition the credit card companies, because they're a private entity that's tracking this. That's what credit cards are. They're not government people. They're private entities. And if they're personally tracking it, they can actually do the registration and do all the other things that the government can't do. That's why that public-private partnership that Glenn Beck talks about, that sounds kind of, like conspiracy theory. It's not, if you look at this from the lens of the legal perspective. That there are laws in place that keep and restrain the federal government that don't apply to private entities. And if the federal government uses crony capitalism to get in bed with these guys, they now have the method and the means to track your firearms purchases and to mark you as an undesirable person. And what I see this leading to is people being debanked and not being able to spend their money as they please. So the voters in Colorado, so a ballot measure was put on, so it's going to be put up for vote, and it has the potential to pass because people are stupid, for an additional excise tax for firearm purchases. So what I see here is what our federal government does already. There's a 12% excise tax put on any fully assembled firearm right now. That's why you see AR-15 guys that buy their parts and build them. It's actually slightly cheaper, because if you buy a completed firearm, you're paying a 12% excise tax already, so that you can fund the ATF and you can fund background checks and all these other things. Colorado is trying to do the same thing. Now, that speaks volumes already of why you shouldn't allow this. But the way I see this is an unjust tax that is happening to one specific population just because they're exercising their rights. And if they are allowed to do it once, this podcast exists because if you give the government an inch, it'll take 10 miles, not just a mile. It'll take 10, 100, 1,000 miles. And we end up with these fights that we have to fight in the future. This is a way that they could tax the poorest of the poor from being able to exercise their 2A rights. That's bad. And anytime you let the mob go ahead and do this, they're more likely to vote for the feel-good measure. And that's why I think Biden could very well still win, because there's a lot of people that hate Trump. Just the name irks them. Okay? In July 25th, federal firearms dealers in Colorado will be required to obtain a state permit that costs $400 and subject to random inspections and by whatever law enforcement agency that they're going to have perpetrate this, or whoever petitions to get that. So why is that a problem? Do you agree with the extra tax that you have to pay to have an NFA item? Should that tax exist? Should you allow firearms guys, firearms dealers, the guys that are just making an honest living selling a product that people want, to have to be taxed again, in addition to all the licensing, all the other fees they already pay to service your 2A rights? Now you're having them pay another $400 tax. This, and then being be done up by the law, the legal system, so that they can actually go in and inspect them at any given time, any given day, whatever the reason. Because that's how you have to think about it from this lens, is that you've seen the weaponization of the legal system by one political party, and a lot of you guys are voicing your opinion to try to get the other side to do the same thing. War is war. I understand that. But allowing them this power, period, is dangerous. Because you see the repercussions, because you've seen it with what's happening with the presidential candidate right now. So this is where I'm coming from. This is the ANCAP part of me. The libertarian guys are always looking at this stuff saying, look, why are you allowing the government any more power, period? Because the minute you do, they're going to exploit it. And if you don't believe that's happening, look again. Look at everything you've experienced in the last 5 years and tell me you've not seen the government go out of control, one way or another. Okay, let's see. Safe storage in vehicles. So they've extended that out from what New Mexico has. New Mexico still has your car is an extension of your home. Therefore, you can conceal a firearm in your car, and carrying one it's perfectly legal in New Mexico. In Colorado, they're saying you now have to have a safe storage device in your car to have your firearm. That means it has to be locked, unloaded, stuck away, and if you need it right then, good luck getting those keys out. Good luck unlocking this thing and using it in one of those, one instances where you might actually need it is where road rage comes into play. People have bad days that you don't know anything about, and you could take a wrong turn and somehow piss someone off, or you can get in a lane and somehow piss someone off. And their first instinct is towards violence. And how do you protect yourself against violence? If anything, I tell you guys time and time again, for those of you that are regular listeners, stay strapped or get clapped. You guys know this mantra. It's kind of hilarious, but that is the truth. You are your own very first responder. And when seconds count and help is minutes away or hours away, depending on where you are, what are you going to do to defend yourself? You pissed off a dude, you're a young lady, a young woman, and you pissed off a 6'6" football player because he's roid raging and he's pissed off. And he's punching at your car door with a baseball bat. And now, what are you going to do? Because if he breaks that glass, you have the right to defend yourself. That is clear. Because that glass can hurt you. And he has escalated the violence to that level of where you can respond with lethal force. Okay? But if you're having to fight your stupid storage container to get your gun, you're in a panic. You are already losing some of your fine motor skills where keys are going to be, you're trying to find these keys or you're trying to enter the code to open this device. Then you're going to have to get your gun out, then probably have to load it and do everything else. And you're going to do that in the time it takes for him to break the glass, drag you out of the car, and beat the hell out of you, possibly kill you. So I don't agree with that at all. Same thing with safe storage gun bills in New Mexico. We already have them. If you're caught with a gun in your own home and it's not locked up in some way, you can be fined and you can be arrested for that. So there's some stuff for stolen weapons. This would increase the penalties for stealing a gun, valued at less than $1,000. It was rejected in committee. This is one that actually got turned down, so good for them. At the same time, if you steal a gun, as far as I'm concerned, that's theft of a property. It should be a felony of any kind. Just because you broke into something. So this is a new one that I didn't. It died. So it died in the calendar. But I could see this being put in New Mexico, or them trying to do it, as firearms liability insurance. Now, if you're a responsible concealed carry person, I would recommend you get this. Because if you're ever done up in a legal case, you may need that extra insurance, and the insurance places are really good about providing lawyers and helping you get out of on bail. I say that's a good idea. Should you have it, or should you be required to have it? Absolutely not. On the better front, Texas, man, they're hitting it out of the park. Texas Supreme Court enjoined the new FFL rules. So the new definition of the FFL, they're using the APA, which is the Procedures Act, it's the Arms Procedures Act. And what they're doing there is saying that the ATF overstepped their bounds in redefining what an FFL is, and that they have left it so nebulous, which I've talked about on this podcast. Basically what this, the new definition of an FFL would have been, is it would have allowed people that have sold a gun for any kind of profit, and it could be just as little as a gun, to be defined as an FFL. And then you'd be facing federal crimes because you didn't possess an FFL. Now, an FFL isn't hard to obtain. It is, however, a thing you have to keep books. You have to be doing this for a profit to be an FFL. And the ATF then has access to any of your facilities that you have, because they want to be able to go inspect what you own. So this is a good win for us. You know, when we're celebrating these things, these wins, we have to look at those losses in Colorado. That these seem temporary, you know, and they're always going to try to whittle away at the Second Amendment every which way they can. You have to fight it, because each time they take one little piece of your right away, you know, in 1986, when people voted for Reagan the second time, you know, and they decided that it was okay for him to pass the machine gun ban. You know, some years later, us people that were alive then, I was in second grade in 86, and I remember being able to go into a gun store, and I remember holding a fully automatic AK and a fully automatic AR-15, an M16 actually. And it was perfectly legal 1 month. That my dad took me into this new gun store in northwest New Mexico, and the next month it was illegal. And these were pulled off the store's shelves, and people were in a panic. Why? Now, you have to have a gun that was made pre-1986 if it's a fully automatic. It has to be on some sort of ATF registry that says you can purchase it. You have to pay a tax for it. You have to pass a background check. And you have to purchase it. And because there's a limited supply, and there are no new ones being made or allowed on the ATF registry, you're now having to pay for this exorbitant amount for this item, because it's worth a lot. An M16, for instance, if you were wanting to buy an M16, I think the going rate is around $10,000 to $20,000 for a fully automatic one. Just the receiver that houses that's the registerable part, so that you could replace parts as you need to, like barrels and bolt carrier groups and everything else. But the receiver itself is the main thing they're selling, just like the HK trigger packs. There's a lot of people that in the 80s bought a lot of trigger packs, serialized them, registered with the ATF before this outright ban happened, so that you didn't have to go through or didn't have to worry about it, and you could still put them on the ATF registry. And they're selling those for $20,000 to $40,000 the last time I looked for one, because I would love to have a full auto HK trigger pack, so that I could one day, maybe, if I pay the right taxes, go through the right background checks, and do all the rigmarole, have an MP5 with the giggle switch. Because it's the one fully automatic I've shot that I actually would own. Now, I'm not a huge fan of fully automatics because you have to feed them, and that gets expensive. But in this day and age where 9mm become akin to 22, it's nowhere near as cheap as a 22. But for fun factor, it ranks right there, because you can get the rounds pretty inexpensively. You can go spend a day on the range, run through some rounds, and you're not going to feel the pocketbook shrink so dramatically that you're worried about it too bad. Yeah, it's a bad day when you drop 1,000 rounds of 9mm, but it's nowhere near as bad as if you should drop the 1,000 rounds of 5.56 or 308 nowadays. And those rounds are going for like 60 cents a round. okay? Your average 9mm is going for like 25 or 35 cents, depending upon where you go. So that's half as much, but you get the same type of training. You can do the same type of close quarters training with a 9mm. And there's a reason why submachine guns and PCCs have taken off, is because people have seen a lot of utilitarian purposes for them, myself included. You know, I always wanted an MP5 since the 80s, since Die Hard, I think it was, or something. I remember having a cap gun that was an MP5. It was modeled after an MP5, an integral suppressed MP5, that you would load strips of caps in, and when you fired it off, it would actually peel them off the top, and it looked like little mini red shell casings that would fall out. And I had that gun forever until I turned the age where my dad and I started really getting into the 2A, meaning that I got my first real rifle, my first deer rifle, and my dad took away all my toys. He said, "You're playing with the real thing now." He didn't mean playing, he meant you're using the real thing now. It's time to give up these childish pursuits and be a man in the 2A. And from that point on, I wasn't allowed to have toy guns. And I understand that, because there is no point where you play in the 2A. You actually are pretty serious. That is where I understand that fully. I have a problem with people that it's a slight problem. It's an aesthetic problem more so than anything else. I don't understand making these guns look like toys, because to young kids, that is something that they're going to see as a toy, because they don't understand anything unless you've trained them better. Now, if you train them and show them that that particular item is not a toy, that's great, but what about their friends? You know, I've seen Glocks that were painted up to look like Nintendo duck hunt guns. That's dangerous, because if a kid sees an old Nintendo gun and thinks it's all fun and games, and then comes to your house and somehow finds one of these that is done up like that, because kids will show their friends your guns, whether you want to know it or not, or whether you want to admit it or not, that's what I mean. They'll actually do that. And usually, I'm going to guess, with my kids, they were done fairly responsibly. And that's because they understood at a very, very young age how deadly these were. And I'm almost 100% sure that I was involved in showing them off each time, because of that involvement I took with my kids and showed them how deadly they were. Yeah, we can absolutely show your friends, but make sure I'm there to show you, because you're still learning about these things. Let's get you the right training, get you to where you're comfortable with them, and get you to know what to be in the know. And the reason why I did that, I've covered that on the podcast too, is I was terrified of my kids, my young kids, my boys and my daughter, going to someone else's house and one of their friends pulling one of these out and having an accidental shooting and killing one of my kids, or my kids accidentally killing someone else. And with that comes from my dad and my Uncle Phil. You show them very early what these things are capable of. You teach them how to be fun, how to use them for fun, but you teach them how deadly and destructive they can be. You're not scaring them, you're teaching them. You're educating them. And to this day, I can see my kids reflecting those lessons. You know, people talk about legacy. You know, it's a big thing in my church right now, where they're talking about you're supposed to be making legacy in a number of different ways. I know I have a legacy with my kids. You know, when I talk to my kids, or their mother talks to them, or they talk to their friends, you can see my raising, my upbringing in my kids. And that is a legacy that'll never end. You know, you can see the legacy I've left with my friends, the other people I brought to the 2A. I love seeing those people that are new to the 2A that take to it like water, and they become staunch advocates for it. They flip 180. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for taking new shooters out and being the best advocate when you take them out. Teach them the right way, teach them how to use it responsibly, but make them have fun. You know, make this a fun experience, because that will do more to combat all this leftist bullcrap about guns than anything else we could do. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.